It was April of 1995, a quiet Wednesday night at St. Mary's Catholic Academy, a small boarding school tucked away in the desert plains of New Mexico. The evening routine was always the same: supper at 6, study hall at 7, and evening prayers in the chapel before lights out at 9. That night, 15 girls, all between the ages of 12 and 14, filed into the chapel in their plaid skirts and pressed white blouses. They knelt in the pews, whispering Hail Marys while Sister Catherine led the prayers. Witnesses later said nothing seemed unusual: no arguments, no signs of distress. The girls bowed their heads in silence as the candles flickered against the stained glass windows. When the bell rang the next morning for breakfast, the dormitory felt too quiet. A nun walked down the hallway expecting to wake the girls, but when she opened the first door, every bed was neatly made, as if no one had slept in it. Pillowcases were smooth, blankets tucked tight. The shoes lined under the beds were perfectly paired, untouched. She checked the next room, same thing. And then the next. All 15 girls from different grades had seemingly disappeared overnight, leaving behind a strange orderliness that made the scene even more unsettling. At first, staff thought it was a prank. Teenagers sometimes tried sneaking out after curfew, though never in such a coordinated way. But when teachers searched the halls, classrooms, and the old gymnasium, they found no signs of life. The back doors were locked from the inside. The windows had iron bars. Even the chapel was empty, the candles burned down to stubs. Not a single trace of footprints was found outside on the gravel path, even though a rainstorm had passed through hours earlier. If the girls had left the building, there should have been mud, prints, something. There was nothing. By mid-morning, panic spread through the school. Phone calls were made to parents, then to local police, then to the FBI. One detective who walked through the dormitory later described it as eerily staged, like a museum exhibit frozen in time. The beds, the shoes, even notebooks with assignments neatly stacked. It was as if the girls had been preparing for the next school day, but never made it to morning. No struggle, no noise, no broken locks, just absence. Rumors started almost instantly. Some whispered about kidnappers. Others muttered about tunnels under the school grounds that led to the desert. The nuns, visibly shaken, spoke of the devil testing their faith. Parents arrived within hours, their cries echoing through the empty halls as they searched for their daughter's belongings. One mother collapsed when she found her child's rosary on the nightstand, untouched, as if the girl had simply vanished into thin air while clutching her prayers the night before. The investigation began immediately. Police sealed off the campus, treating it like a crime scene. Detectives dusted for fingerprints, searched for tire tracks, even brought in dogs to sniff for clues. The dogs led handlers around the dormitories and into the chapel, but then stopped cold, sitting down in confusion as if the trail simply evaporated. No blood, no broken locks, no signs of forced entry, nothing to work with. The FBI took over within days, hoping that a mass disappearance of this scale might connect to human trafficking or cult activity. But even they admitted, behind closed doors, that it didn't fit any pattern they had ever seen. Weeks turned into months, and investigators grew desperate. They scoured the desert for shallow graves, old mines, or abandoned ranch houses where the girls might have been hidden. Helicopters swept over the barren plains, their searchlights crawling over miles of sand and brush. Volunteers combed the riverbanks, carrying lanterns late into the night. But every search ended the same way: empty-handed. The desert stretched wide and merciless, offering no clues, no answers. The case files filled up with photographs of empty classrooms, abandoned shoes, and faces of 15 girls whose smiles would soon be seen only on missing posters. Frustration soon boiled over in the community. Parents accused the school of negligence. Protesters gathered at the gates, demanding the church take responsibility. The priests and nuns insisted they knew nothing more than anyone else, but whispers spread about dark practices and forbidden rituals that the clergy might have been hiding. The FBI interviewed every staff member, yet no one cracked. Everyone had the same story: the girls had gone to bed, and by morning, they were gone. The school's reputation collapsed overnight, forcing its doors to close just 2 years later, its once bustling halls left to rot under desert storms. By the late 90s, the case had grown cold. New crimes and scandals replaced it in the headlines, and even the parents began to fade from the spotlight, some of them moving away just to escape the grief. But in town, the silence around St. Mary's only fueled speculation. Locals swore the government was covering something up. Some claimed agents were seen digging near the chapel late at night, hauling away boxes. Others whispered about underground tunnels sealed in concrete before anyone could see what was inside. The official reports made no mention of any of it. Yet despite the silence, the pain lingered. Every year, on the anniversary of the disappearance, families gathered outside the gates of the abandoned school, lighting candles and leaving flowers along the cracked sidewalks. They prayed, they cried, and they waited for answers that never came. And with each passing year, the mystery only grew darker, because the more time went by, the more it seemed like those 15 girls had been swallowed by the earth itself. 3 years after the disappearance, when the search had gone silent, the first strange reports started to surface. Long-haul truckers driving the endless highways near the Mexican border began calling in sightings of young girls walking along the roadside at night. They weren't hitchhiking, they weren't running, they weren't panicked. According to drivers, they were walking in single file, heads bowed, wearing what looked like outdated Catholic school uniforms. The truckers swore the girls all seemed the same age, between 12 and 14, and always in groups of 15. Never more, never less. One driver described slowing down, thinking he'd stumbled on a runaway group from a shelter. But when his headlights caught their faces, he said their eyes were too dark like pools of ink. The girls didn't react to his horn, didn't flinch at the beam of his high beams. They just kept walking, silently, until, suddenly, they weren't there anymore. The driver pulled over, got out, and looked around with a flashlight. The road was empty, not a single footprint in the dirt. His dashcam footage, later reviewed, showed only static where the girls should have been. Word of these encounters spread among truckers like ghost stories. Some laughed it off, blaming exhaustion or desert heat mirages. But the ones who swore they saw it had the same detail: the uniforms, the silence, and the vanishing. A few even reported hearing faint whispers through their CB radios when they passed the stretch of highway near the abandoned school. One veteran driver said a girl's voice came through the static, soft but clear, "Don't stop." Locals soon added their own stories. Ranchers claimed they saw shadows moving along fence lines late at night, small figures darting across the fields but leaving no tracks behind. A Border Patrol agent on night duty confessed privately that he spotted girls sitting in the desert brush, hands folded in prayer, only for them to fade as he approached. He never filed an official report, said no one would believe him. Instead, he simply transferred to another station, far away from that sector. By 2001, the sightings became almost routine, enough that some truckers refused to drive that highway after dark. They said it wasn't just about what they saw, but how it made them feel. A chilling sense of being watched from the inside out, like those girls weren't asking for help but studying them, waiting for something. Each account only deepened the mystery, because the descriptions were always identical, down to the smallest detail. It was as if the vanished class of 1995 was still out there, walking the desert roads, bound together by something no one could explain. 7 years after the Catholic school vanished from headlines, the case roared back to life in the most unexpected way. In the summer of 2002, a cargo truck approached a remote Border Patrol checkpoint just outside El Paso, Texas. The driver appeared jittery, sweating despite the cool desert night. He handed over his papers with a trembling hand and insisted he was hauling second-hand furniture across the border. Something about his unease set off alarms for the agents on duty, who decided to run the truck through their new X-ray scanning system, a routine security measure meant to catch drug smugglers and human trafficking. As the truck rolled past the scanner, the monitors inside the control booth flickered, then stabilized. What the officers saw made them freeze. On the screen, the cargo bay did not look like furniture. Instead, it showed rows of thin, human-shaped figures sitting perfectly upright in chairs, as if positioned deliberately. There were 15 of them shoulder to shoulder, their heads bowed slightly forward, hands resting on their laps. The shapes were unmistakable, girls. Yet the driver's manifest showed nothing but miscellaneous household items. The agents immediately drew their weapons and ordered the driver out of the cab. He dropped to his knees, crying, insisting he had no idea what they were talking about. The agents, still shaken, rushed to the back of the truck and pried open the cargo doors. Inside they found nothing but dust, shadows, and 15 old wooden chairs strapped neatly to the floor. No bodies, no girls, just furniture. Yet when they checked the X-ray screen again, the ghostly figures were still there, seated in those very chairs, unmoving, as if waiting. Confusion turned to dread. One agent climbed inside to check the chairs more closely. He swore later that the air felt different in the cargo hold, stale, heavy, almost suffocating. He touched one of the chairs and recoiled, saying it felt warm, as though someone had just been sitting in it. Another officer tried taking a photograph with his disposable camera, but the film came back completely black, as if the image had been swallowed. The driver, meanwhile, screamed that he didn't know how the chairs got there, that he'd picked up the load from a warehouse in Juarez. His story never changed. The discovery rattled everyone involved. Word spread quickly through the checkpoint, but higher authorities moved in almost immediately, sealing the area. The truck was hauled away, the driver taken into custody, and the agents were told to file minimal paperwork. But none of them forgot the X-ray image of 15 blurred, spectral figures frozen in place, staring straight ahead. Even years later, some agents admitted they wished they'd never looked at that monitor, because the longer you stared at those shapes, the more it felt like the girls were staring back. When the Border Patrol agents swung open the truck's cargo doors, they expected screaming captives, or at the very least, bodies packed under tarps. Instead, they stood frozen at the sight of 15 wooden chairs, each strapped tightly to the floor with rusted chains and bolts. The chairs were old, polished oak, the kind you'd find in a church or chapel, worn smooth by decades of use. But what unsettled the officers wasn't the furniture itself. It was the way the chairs were arranged, 3 perfect rows of 5, all facing forward. Just like a classroom. One of the younger agents whispered that it looked like the seating in the abandoned chapel of St. Mary's Academy. His comment earned him a sharp look from his supervisor, who barked at him to keep working. But the detail was undeniable. Each chair had deep scratches carved into the arms, as though fingernails had raked across the wood over and over. In some places, faint impressions in the seat cushions almost resembled the shapes of small bodies. The air inside the cargo bay was unnaturally cold, even though it was a blistering July night in the desert. To test their eyes, the agents rolled the truck back through the X-ray scanner while the doors remained open. The screen once again lit up with the same impossible image, 15 girls seated in those very chairs, staring straight ahead. Yet standing inside, the officers saw nothing but shadows and splinters. One veteran swore he caught a whiff of incense, the same smell used during Catholic masses. Another said he heard faint whispers echoing against the steel walls, though the others dismissed it as nerves. Still, no one stayed inside the trailer for long. The driver was brought back in handcuffs, shaking uncontrollably. He swore on his life that he had never seen those chairs before, that his paperwork only listed old storage goods. When asked why the chains looked so old, why the layout looked so deliberate, he broke down completely, screaming that he didn't want to go near the truck again. "They were looking at me," he cried. "On the screen, they weren't just sitting there. They knew I was watching." His outburst only made the agents more uneasy, because privately, many of them had felt the same way. Despite their fear, protocol demanded they inventory everything. Photographs were snapped, reports written, but none of the photos developed correctly. Every roll of film came back warped, blurred, or completely black. Electronic cameras malfunctioned the second they powered on inside the truck. And so, the only record that survived was the grainy X-ray scan itself, showing those 15 seated figures frozen in place. It was enough to terrify the men who witnessed it, but apparently not enough for the public. Because within hours, federal officials arrived, shut down the checkpoint, and ordered everyone present to stay quiet. By the next morning, the El Paso checkpoint looked nothing like the scene from the night before. The cargo truck, the wooden chairs, even the driver, all were gone. Federal SUVs had rolled in overnight, their tinted windows hiding grim-faced men in dark suits. They gave no names, no ranks, only credentials flashed so quickly that agents barely had time to read them. Every officer who had seen the X-ray images was ordered into a private briefing room. The message was short and brutal. You saw nothing. You'll write nothing. And if anyone asks, this truck never existed. The Border Patrol agents were forced to sign non-disclosure agreements on the spot. Some resisted at first, insisting the truth needed to be reported, but one look at the silent men in suits convinced them otherwise. One agent later admitted that he had been quietly threatened. His family, his pension, even his freedom were on the line if he spoke out. He described the men as government, but not the kind you ever want to meet twice. By sunrise, the checkpoint reopened as though nothing had ever happened, with fresh uniforms on duty who hadn't seen a thing. Rumors leaked anyway. Within days, whispers circulated among law enforcement circles that the truck had been escorted to a secure underground facility outside Albuquerque. No one knew if it was military or private, but trucks loaded with lead containers were reportedly seen leaving the site at night. Some believed the chairs had been destroyed. Others said they were kept in a climate-controlled vault, under constant surveillance. But what unsettled everyone most was the persistent claim that even in the vault, the figures still appeared on X-ray scans, unchanged, seated, waiting. A single audio recording allegedly slipped through the cracks. A muffled tape said to be captured by an officer during the briefing. The voice on it trembles as he whispers. They weren't dead. They weren't alive either. They were aware. The clip circulated online briefly before being scrubbed, though copies occasionally resurface on conspiracy forums. Skeptics dismiss it as a hoax, but those who heard it in person swear the man's voice carried the kind of fear you can't fake. From that point forward, anyone who asked questions about St. Mary's Academy or the missing girls hit a wall of silence. Files disappeared from local police archives. Parents who demanded answers were stonewalled, told that the government had no further comment. Even reporters who tried digging into the checkpoint incident found themselves shadowed, their sources drying up overnight. For the families still clinging to hope, this silence was worse than grief. It was proof that someone, somewhere, knew the truth and was determined to bury it. Years after the checkpoint incident, the abandoned grounds of St. Mary's Academy became a destination for thrill seekers, ghost hunters, and desperate parents who refused to let go. The building itself was a husk, its windows shattered, its paint peeling under the desert sun. But at night, locals swore the place came alive. Farmers in the area claimed to hear the old chapel bell tolling after midnight, even though the mechanism had rusted solid years ago. Sometimes, the bell rang only once. Other times it rang 15 times, slow and deliberate, as if counting each girl who had vanished. Visitors who dared to step inside the chapel told eerily similar stories. They said the pews seemed freshly polished, despite the dust coating everything else in the building. Candle holders sat empty, yet some nights faint flames flickered along the altar, as if invisible hands were lighting them. More disturbing were the whispers, low, hushed voices reciting Latin prayers in unison. They weren't loud but steady, echoing across the cracked walls in a way that left even the bravest investigators shaken. Locals avoided the grounds after dark, but truckers passing on nearby roads claimed the phenomenon reached beyond the academy itself. On moonless nights, some reported seeing 15 young girls walking across the schoolyard, their uniforms crisp and untouched by time. They never acknowledged onlookers, never spoke, never strayed from their perfect line. The moment anyone approached, they dissolved into the shadows, yet the sound of their synchronized footsteps lingered in the air. Rumors spread that the girls weren't trapped in one place but bound to something larger, something that followed wherever their story was remembered. A former Border Patrol agent, long retired, confessed in an anonymous interview that the girls' faces sometimes appeared on security monitors and X-ray scans hundreds of miles away. Always the same 15 figures, always seated, always waiting. He claimed he once saw them turn their heads toward the camera in unison, staring straight at him, before vanishing. For the families, this became the cruelest twist of all, the sense that their daughters were neither gone nor found, but caught in some in-between state that no one could explain. The chapel still stands, decaying a little more each year, but those who've heard the bell insist it isn't just a haunting. They believe the girls are still there, their voices rising in prayer, waiting for something, or someone, to finally answer. So, what really happened to the 15 girls of St. Mary's Academy? Were they taken, hidden, or pulled into something none of us can understand? The government won't talk, the files are gone, and the chapel still stands as a silent witness in the desert. But if you ever find yourself driving those empty New Mexico highways at night, keep your eyes on the roadside, because some truckers still swear if you look closely you might see 15 figures walking in the dark, heads bowed, uniforms untouched by time, and if you do, don't stop. Just keep driving. If you liked this video, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Most importantly, subscribe and hit the bell icon so the next secret finds you first.